Hey, you're on the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It's Sunday night. We do this every Sunday night, whether you're here or not. We've got a lot of different things going on here in my neck of the woods, trying to record on YouTube at the same time we're recording here, trying to do all different kind of things. Anyway, as the evening unfolds, we'll figure some of that out. I'm glad you're here. You signed up to get our weekly rundown of topics. You gotta email me at thebibleforum@gmail.com. We'll send you that email every Saturday. Give you a rundown on what's going on. We don't send anything else but that. There's nothing else comes out unless there's an emergency or something is going on. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern. We look at life through a biblical lens. We try to solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. Did you know that the world is going crazy? I don't know if you've been paying any attention this week at all, but it's been just a little bit nuttier than it usually is. If you live in New York, the COVID pandemic seems to have played into the hands of the most liberal of leaders. Last month, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered healthcare professionals across the state to provide the full residential address and phone number, occupation, and employer's name, plus the full work address and number, as well as race and ethnicity of all patients that have ever been tested for COVID-19 in the state of New York. On Monday, he's up the ante. The new order obtained by Judicial Watch mandates that doctors, quote, collect and report whether a patient attends or works in a school. And if that's true, then the name and location of the school is also desired. This includes elementary, secondary, post-secondary, higher education institutions, teachers, all the rest of it. It's also critical to list the patient's local address if it's different from their permanent address. Healthcare providers must report within 3 hours. 3 hours. The price of noncompliance, civil penalties of up to $2,000 a day. There's no mention in the advisory of privacy safeguards or limits on what can be done with the information. Medical professionals in New York understand the need for COVID-19 testing, but concerns are mounting that Governor Cuomo is using a March state of emergency declaration to just trample, get my mouth tied up here, trample on patients' rights. Are you familiar with the United Methodist Church's logo? They've got 2 red flames that are intertwined with a thin black cross going up in between. Do you know what that represents? Well, it seems that it means different things to different people. Case in point, recently a Methodist pastor, Reverend Edlin Cowley, says it reminds him of the burning crosses he knew in his youth. Crosses set ablaze to instill fear in black people. Pastor Cowley is a black man. Crosses, he said, he saw traveling from Marshall, Texas, where his father pastored a Methodist Episcopal church, to Shreveport, Louisiana, when he was 10 years of age. He thinks the church should have an emblem that is less controversial. Do you know how long they've had that emblem? I remember it a long time ago. I want to say in the 60s, but probably in the 70s. But the United Methodist Church is going to take up this cause, this effort, at their next annual meeting, whenever they can find the place and the time and the freedom to have it. President Trump said recently, "I am announcing that I will be signing the Born Alive executive order to assure that all precious babies born alive, no matter their circumstances, receive the medical care that they deserve. This is our sacrosanct moral duty." He added that his administration will provide increased federal funding for neonatal research. All of this according to CBN. At the time of the writing, the full text of the Born Alive Executive Act has yet to be released. A bill bearing the same name had previously been introduced in Congress multiple times, but has yet to pass through both houses. According to the Catholic News Agency, the proposed bill requires that babies who survive failed abortions must be given medical care, just as if they had been born prematurely under different circumstances. Apparently, there's no more disposing of them in the trash and then waiting for them to stop crying. Oh, come on. That's what they did. Following Trump's announcement, Gene Mancini, president of the Pro-Life March of Life, lauded him for his actions. President Trump, she said, once again has stepped up for life. His actions today provide necessary legal protections for some of the most vulnerable in society, the survivors of failed abortions. Mancini explained that the order was necessary as some Democrats in the Senate promised to block legislation that mandates basic medical care for children who survive an abortion. An extremist view shared by vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Keep in mind, this is what they have done every time this issue has been brought up in Congress. At stake are an estimated 17,000 babies every year. More than 680,000 human beings who survived abortion since the U.S. Supreme Court issued its landmark Roe v. Wade decision more than 40 years ago. The CDC said a long time ago that they had estimated about one child a day survived his or her mother's effort to kill him. You take that throughout the course of Roe versus Wade, and it's 17,155. Odin's comments came the same day President Trump said he would issue an executive order protecting babies who survive abortion. People seem to think that the legislation is not necessary, that an executive order isn't necessary. But Mancini says, I'm here to tell you it is. A study by the Cultural Research Center in Arizona Christian University found that just 6% of Americans adhere to biblical principles, to the biblical worldview. The findings released in the American Worldview Inventory 2020 also indicates that millennials represented the lowest number of biblical worldview holders. Millennials, only 6% of them hold to a biblical worldview. It was twice that much in the mid-1990s. It was 12%. But nowhere is this cultural shift more dramatic than among the youngest American adults, people ages 18 to 36. That generation is radically different in its worldview and beliefs from all previous generations. The question becomes why? And I don't know what the experts are saying, but I'm here to tell you. It's because of the breakdown of the family. Children now get their worldview from school, from television, from their cell phone. Anything they can access digitally. And yes, young children now have their own phones. Additionally, the survey found millennials are the most likely to exact revenge when wronged and are the least enthusiastic about America. At the same time, most millennials claim to be Christians, even though they have the least biblical view, according to this survey. All of this is just fascinating and amazing on a lot of different levels. That people can say they believe this and live this other way. Millennials are reporting that they have the least respect for other people out of all age groups surveyed. And they're twice as likely to say they respect someone who holds the same religious and political views that they do. The implication is not the other guy. The survey used Barna's definition of a biblical worldview, which the Christian Post summarized as, quote, believing that absolute moral truths exist and that such truth is defined by the Bible, as well as having the firm belief in 6 specific religious positions. They are that Jesus Christ lived a sinless life, that God is the all-powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe and still rules over it today, that salvation is a gift from God and cannot be earned, that Satan is real, that a Christian has the responsibility to share their faith in Christ with other people, and that the Bible is accurate in all of its teachings. In general, 70% of evangelical churchgoers say people are basically good. The Bible? All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That's not basically good. That's basically evil. In general, 44% of American believers think that Jesus sinned in his earthly life. If he had one sin in his life, his sacrifice would have been rejected. 58% of Americans believe moral truth is pretty much up to the individual. It's not absolute. A record low of 6% of Americans adhere to a biblical worldview. Now you know why we're in the mess we're in. These people are on television, these leaders and others, and they're all Christians. Not all, but they'll tell you. But this is the kind of thing millennials believe. Our president said, in my second term, I will provide school choice to every parent in America. That was considered radical by the left. In a State of the Union address back in February, President Trump called on Congress to pass the Education Freedom Scholarships and Opportunities Act. That legislation would inject up to $5 billion every year into state-controlled tuition scholarship programs. This according to the Department of Education. The next step forward in building an inclusive society is making sure that every young American gets a great education and the opportunity to achieve the American dream, the president said. He went on to say, yet for too long, countless American children have been trapped in failing government schools. And to rescue these students, 18 states have created school choice in the form of opportunity scholarships. The programs are so popular that tens of thousands of students remain on waiting lists. President Trump highlighted the case of one such student, a young fellow by the name of Janiah Davis, a fourth grader in Philadelphia, who at the time was watching the speech with her mother from the House gallery as the guests of the president. He informed them that their wait for a scholarship was over because she would be receiving one. The liberal line? When we divert public funds to private schools, we undermine the entire public education system. That from former Vice President Joe Biden. We've got to prioritize investing in our public schools so every child in America gets a fair shot, he said. That's why I oppose vouchers. That was just this past January. The interpretation? We need every child in our government schools to make sure they get the liberal view of life and that they vote Democrat. If schools do not reopen, our president said, the funding should go to parents to send their child to public, private, charter, religious, or homeschool of their choice. The key word here is choice. If the school is closed, the money should follow the students, so the parents and the families are in control of their own decisions. When was the last time you heard logic like that? Practicality. There's a lot of talk today about developing flu shots. You going to get one? According to White House editor Margaret Tlaib, the share of Americans who say they'll try a first-generation corona vaccine is plummeting. According to the Axios Ipsos Coronavirus Index, the trend is true among both Democrats and Republicans. Democrats from 57% are saying no. Republicans 42 to 33% no. The general population 47 to 39%. And why does any of that matter? Well, as the United States moves on from the milestone of 200,000 deaths, it shows the risk of politicizing the virus and its treatments. It's another warning of the difficulties health authorities will face in convincing enough Americans that a vaccine is safe and effective. She writes, respondents in week 25 of our national survey feel a vaccine would be risky. Only half are prepared to pay out of pocket for it. Just 13% say they'd be willing to try it immediately. And men remain more likely than women to take the first-generation vaccine. Black Americans are about half as likely as Hispanics or whites to take it. The Democrats are bringing our society ever closer to normalizing pedophilia by giving sexual agency to young children. California is predictably leading the way down this slippery slope. Under the guise of combating anti-LGBTQ discrimination, Golden State lawmakers recently passed Senate Bill 145, which significantly weakens state laws designed to protect minors from sexual abuse at the hands of adults. While ostensibly intended to eliminate disparities in handling of the statutory rape cases so that heterosexual and homosexual acts are treated the same, the legislation takes an upside-down approach that puts all children at risk. Instead of enhancing protections for victims of heterosexual predators, this Senate Bill 145 diminishes protections for victims of homosexual predators by making it possible for them to avoid felony charges and the sex offender registry as long as the offender is within 10 years of the age of their victim. Theoretically, a 20-year-old predator could receive leniency for sexual crimes committed against a 10-year-old. Existing law does not specifically differentiate based on sexual orientation of the perpetrator, but does give judges more discretion over punishments involving vaginal intercourse than it does for those involving anal or oral intercourse. Opponents offered a common sense alternative that would have addressed the issue by imposing the same mandatory penalties for all forms of sexual abuse involving minors. However, proponents do not seem to have seriously considered that option at all. Why? Well, because it conflicts with their unstated goal of breaking down the moral fiber of society by sexualizing children. No? Then you must not be paying attention these last 30 years. Despite avid protests from constituents, Los Angeles County District Attorney Jackie Lacey, who drafted the legislation, demonstrated just how warped the Democrat Party's thinking has become on this matter, explaining, quote, "This bill allows judges and prosecutors to evaluate cases involving consensual sex acts between young people, regardless of their sexual orientation, and do so on an individual basis." The problem with Lacey's reasoning is that there is no such thing as consensual sexual acts involving minors, not legally. And that's the whole reason we have laws against statutory rape. It's why we don't have children that are 12 and 14 years old emancipated and treated as adults. We don't do that. We're at 18. It used to be 21. They're trying to drop it to 15. I forgot what state, maybe North Carolina. Somebody is dropping it to 15. Children don't have the intellectual, the emotional capacity to give meaningful, informed consent to any kind of sexual activity. And that concept should not be controversial. Compounding the problem, State Bill 145 comes on the heels of the so-called California Healthy Youth Act, which mandates sexual education for K through 12 students. Education designed to teach them what they call healthy attitudes concerning adolescent growth and development, body image, gender, sexual orientation, relationships, marriage, and family. And they're going to start in kindergarten. Not on my child. Why are teachers extolling the virtues of sexual self-exploration, homosexuality, or transgenderism to children who instead should be equipped with information to keep them safe from the dangers of sexual predators? At best, all this teaching serves to do is to confuse them. At worst, it piques their curiosity about a subject that far too many adults are eager to proselytize about for ideological reasons. California has historically had some of the strongest laws against sex trafficking of any state. But the legislation being pushed by the Democrat elected officials who control the state is steadily undermining the resolve to prevent, sexual exploitation of young people. Whether they're doing it intentionally or not, Democrats are moving toward normalizing pedophilia as they implement their radical pro-LGBTQ agenda. Another reason why so many Californians are moving. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska was quick this week to the starting gun, telling reporters that she would not vote to confirm Supreme Court nominee, any Supreme Court nominee. And all of that within hours of Ginsburg's death. The reality, if these people truly believe standing between their GOP colleagues and an opportunity to institute a 6-3 conservative majority on the court is a principled decision, then their values are so far outside the Republican mainstream, and I would add common sense mainstream, they ought not call themselves Republicans at all. And somewhere on the very far side is Don Lemon. Don Lemon works for CNN. He's an ultra-left liberal. On a recent show with Chris Cuomo, another ultra-left liberal, he suggested that Democrats must blow up the entire system. His quote, if a Trump Supreme Court nominee is confirmed by the Senate before the November election. He said, we're going to have to get rid of the Electoral College, quote, because in this country, it's the majority that decides who the judges are, and those judges decide who the president is. And if Joe Biden wins, Democrats can stack the courts. And they can do that amendment, and they can get it passed, he argued. Did I tell you that Cuomo was a liberal? He responded to his guest in a clearly incredulous manner. He said, well, you do need 2/3 vote in Congress and 3/4 in the state legislature. And Lemon said, well, they may do that. They may be able to tear down the systems that have served this country for over 200 years in order to create a government that will allow them to ram through a radical anti-American agenda. Excuse me. And Cuomo said, I don't know about that. Now, when your ideas are so far to the left that even Chris Cuomo thinks they're radical, you may have gone too far. It may be that Lemon's comments are just insane. Unfortunately, much of the left, or at least the loudest leftist voices, agree that the country should be dismantled if the leftist agenda isn't adopted wholesale. Blowing up the system, their words, not mine, blowing up the system, including abolishing the Electoral College. Not a fringe idea. It's now become a mainstream talking point of the modern left. And that should be extremely concerning, to say the least. We'll be back. We're going to look at some politics on the other side, as if we haven't already, but it'll be strictly politics. Stay with me.